Hello and welcome to our next class on history of philosophy. Today we're going to keep talking about the Hellenistic period. That's the third part of this sequence, and I highly recommend that you watch the other parts for you to comprehend it properly. Well, today we're going to talk about the Stoic ethics is the main theme that the Stoics developed. As most of Hellenistic philosophers, they agree that ethics is the most important part of philosophy. So we're going to study it a little bit. Then we're going to talk about Pyrrhus and Pyrrhonian skepticism. That's the first development of skepticism, which I think it's really important because in general the history of epistemology is about like avoiding skepticism. So knowing what we want to avoid is very good. So we have Pyrrhonian skepticism, and then we have the academic skepticism, which comes from Plato's Academy, right? And that's on the topic from skepticism to eclecticism. And then we're going to get an overview on the academics of the time, right? But now, starting with Stoic ethics, first part. They say the nature has the tendency to conservate itself and conciliate to itself. That's archaeosis. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Here, they're talking about like when you have a cold thing and a hot thing, they try to become the same. And lots of similar situations are like that, right? The world is always trying to get a balance. And as the Stoics said in their physics, the world is always in that process of destroying itself and then rebuilding, right? So they are always like conciliating itself and getting more simple and affirming itself because when you when you take your contradictions out, you're affirming itself, right? And humans express it by its rationality. And that's the base of ethics, conciliate ourselves with our rationality, right? Because the main human expression of the logos is rationality. The human has this very unique spot of expressing the rationality, expressing the fate, and expressing all the logical, you know, elements of the world inside our minds, right? And the Stoics consider that the most important part. So that's the thing that we need to conciliate, that we need to add to it, that we need to affirm, right? We need to affirm originality. And good, with good, they also talk about moral perfection, is to conservate and add to rationality. And that's accessible to all because that's completely on our minds. That's not external. That's inside us, right? So if we are always thinking, if we are always getting the most rational we can, if we are always comprehending the world and fitting our beliefs with the beliefs of God, the beliefs of the logos, right? The beliefs of the perfect rationality, we are going to that's the good, right? Because then we're making the logos fate. We're putting the logos fate for us in practice. We're putting the archaeoses in practice. And the rest is indifferent, right? The rest does not matter. It's insignificant. Because in general, okay, feeling pain is worse than feeling comfort. But it is not actually important because compared to our rational nature, we're we're in a better situation if we are feeling pain, but we are thinking properly. Feeling pain, but we are wise, correct? Because for them, the most important part, the biggest expression of the logos on ourselves is rationality, right? And they believe that rationality is perfectly capable of comprehending things and getting and fitting into the logos program into the Logos fate for us. But although they agree that moral perfection is only rational, they also comprehend that we cannot just treat as if all the other things were the same. Like in real life, we actually need to choose between them. So they now start talking about value. They say that pain, comfort, poorness, and richness are insignificant, but even between them, some are valuable and others are not. And they also talk about duty. You have the duty to choose the valuable ones, right? The ones that are, because Logos is everything. God is everything, not only our rationality. Our rationality is just the biggest expression of that. But our body is still God. Our body is still have its value. So if you choose the decisions that are better for you, or better for your community, or better for the environment, maybe why not? These these decisions are a duty, right? They are the first group to talk about duty. There was not this expression didn't exist yet on philosophy. Like it wasn't used, right? So they talk about that, about how you have this responsibility to do something because this something is better than the other. And the the value of things creates this responsibility. So there, for us, that's like a really very clear concept, right? It's basically like the base of a dilemma, of a moral dilemma, right? And all the ethics is based on that today. But by that time, this concept was really new and really confusing for them. So we're gonna see later that the mid Stoics developed this concept better and explain it better. How they 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 didn't have this notion, right? That's really interesting. So that's it. That's the basic part of Stoic ethics, right? The value is Archaeos is applied to physical and biological properties, right? So it is applied to anything, but they're a lot, they're tiny compared to our rational goods. Then they say the laws are expressions of the logos, right? Because they are expressions of people's rationality, and people's rationality is one of the biggest expressions of the logos. So, and it's not only the expression of one rational mind, it's like the expression of a group of people that gathered to decide a law. So, you know, we have this duty to follow the laws. And it is a duty, not a moral perfection, because in general people don't know why they're following this law. And moral perfection is only when you're completely in agreement with your own rationality and with others' rationality and with the rationality of God, right? And you're not completely agreeing, you're not completely fitting in the rationality of God if you do not comprehend the law that you're following. So for most of the time, the following a law is only a duty, not actually a moral perfection. Then Archaeoses make us love and conserve not only ourselves, but the world as a whole. They say that comprehending that the Archaeoses is the base of everything and is the base of our lives, we now love and want to conserve and want the best for us, right? We want our rationality to be as as sophisticated as it can be. We want our bodies to be as comfortable as it can be. But we need to extend this to other people with compassion and to our society and then to the whole world and to things, right? But comprehending that the Stoics never stop putting humans in a very important place, right? Because they say that the things can having a hierarchy, right? Our rationality is more God than our body. So as do a rock and a person, right? A person is more existing, is more God, has this the sense of hierarchical properties that Plato developed, right? So they keep it here, but you need to love and conserve other things, but not love and conserve other things equally. You need to always consider and rationally consider, right? And ponderating its values and its moral perfections if you're talking about a person that can have this property of moral perfection. Freedom is given by wisdom, not nature, right? They say that the only truly free person is the wise one, and the only true slave is the fool. So they're completely anti-slavery because they think that there's no justification, there's no justification on the nature of a person, right? For he for they to be slaves, and they also comprehend that slavery is not valuable, right? Talking about our bodies, it's not conservating. It does not. It's completely against everything we're saying until now. It is not rational. There's no justification for that. It does not. It's not a very. It's not an action of love, right? To make someone a slave, as they're saying in the second topic, right? Archaeoses make us love and conserve not only ourselves but everyone, right? Including the slaves. So there is no reason for having that. And for that time, this idea was very, very revolutionary, right? Today, oh, okay, anti-slavery, you're just a normal person. But by that time, anti-slavery were a thing, were a very important topic, and a very important fight that the Stoics used to used to embrace. And they also talk about empathy, a second path to happiness. They say that emotions can still go against rationality. Maybe you do not love everything. Maybe you still hate something. Maybe your emotions are not fitting with the Stoic rationality. They consider that. Then we should extinguish them and comprehend that everything is rational and nothing deserves our emotions, right? Comprehending that everything is rational, everything is perfect, everything is God. It means that things are completely irrelevant in the sense that they do not depend on you. You do not need to get worried about them. You do not need to cry for anything. You do not need to get happy for anything because that's just a rational expression. So they consider that this is one path to follow, right? This is completely okay to do. You can still have emotions, that's not 100% bad, but only if those emotions fit with your rationality. If it do not, then you need to be rational, obviously. The whole Stoic ethics is based on rationality. It's based on this concept that rationality is very important and very valuable and capable of discovering things. Then, broadly speaking, mid Stoicism developed the idea of duty and fitted Stoicism in the science of the time, right? Um, Science was developing a lot, with Euclidean mathematics, with a lot of new discoveries about the nature, about everything. So they kind of put the Stoic physics in the scenario of ancient science, right? And now we're getting into a very interesting part of the class. Because remember that everything on the Stoics were based on rationality and based on the cataplastic impressions that make things comprehensible, right? They believe that rationality is perfectly capable of comprehending anything and perfectly capable of, you know, fitting with God's rationality. And then comes Pyrrhus and develops skepticism for the first time, Skepticism is the comprehension that we cannot understand anything and that the world is completely incomprehensible, right? So, and Pyrrhonian skepticism, this term, is often used to talk about radical skeptics. So, if you see Pyrrhonian skepticism, it does not necessarily mean the skepticism of Pyrrhus with his arguments and with his, you know, it does not mean actually Pyrrhonian skepticism. It's very common to talk about it, meaning just radical skepticism. But we're gonna see what it means in more precisely. Things are completely undetermined, and for truth to exist, it needs to be absolute and eternal, right? For something to be true, it cannot depend on anything per se, because if it depends on something, then it's not completely true. It's just something that happened in that time, right? So, and everything is always moving and is always changing, and we cannot clearly determine what something is and what something is not, right? That's a good way of comprehending it when you think about definitions. If I ask you to define a chair, you would probably not be capable of doing that. Even a very, very simple thing as a chair, it is hard to define it. You say, oh, it needs to have four legs for being a chair. No, the chair I'm in right now does not have four legs. And then you think, oh, it doesn't need to move if it's on the floor, like stuck on the floor. Can it still be a chair? And if you think about electrical chair, it is in the floor, right? So chairs can be you know something that is stuck on the floor. But if you think about maybe why can't some rocks that are for a coincidence organized in a way that is similar to a chair not be a chair if the chair can be stuck into the floor? So stuck on the floor, right? And it is applied to anything, right? Everything is not clearly determined, and anything is absolute or eternal. Without an absolute base for our knowledge, without any statement that is completely true in all situations, we cannot say that anything is true, right? Today we have some of those statements. If we see classical logic as an example, we have the principle of non-contradiction, right? And it's a base. It's a place that everything is based on. And if we don't have it, if if our senses only show us things that are imperfect and that are not eternal, how can we build a true knowledge? There's not this relation. There is, in any situation, you are in an opinion, and then okay, I have this evidence, so I'm not no longer in an opinion. Now I have knowledge. Now I have a justified and true belief. No, because you can never justify anything because you don't have a solid and eternal proposition to justify it. I hope I was clear on this topic. And only a divine nature would be true or false in any level. Because compared to infinity, everything is nothing, right? So for something to be able to exist, actually, to be able to be true or false, and to be able to actually exist, right? It needs to be perfect. It needs to be divine. As Parmenides said. Parmenides said that the only thing that can exist is one being, one eternal and completely powerful being, right? Almost like a god. And then Pyrrhus say, okay, that's actually the only thing that can exist, God. And we need to suspend judgment about anything since we don't know anything. and absolutely anything. Actually, we need to suspend judgment, even about our suspension of judgment, right? We need to suspend judgment even about our capability of, breathing, about if we have or not hands, and these very obvious things. We cannot affirm that. We don't have a solid base. We need only to, you know, stop thinking about it. Okay, I neither know it's false or true or truth. I simply don't know anything at all. And I even do not know that I don't know, right? And without perceiving truth or good or anything, actually, the wise get peace and happiness. And then it will actually express what exists, which is divine. So here he has this very, very interesting comprehension that if we do not perceive truth, then we're just existing. We're just being what God wants us to be. Because remember, the only thing that can exist is God. So if there's something that exists, if there's something that is true, then for to express that, we cannot perceive it. We cannot try to comprehend it and try to do our best. We need only to exist, because by existing we are going to fit into God's plan. And that's how. And actually, not knowing anything and not trying to know anything he says it is peaceful, and it is very happy. It's a happy life. It's the way that we can achieve happiness, by not trying to do anything, not trying actually to discover anything, and getting frustrated because all the arguments you put are going to have somewhere that they fail, that they assume something that they shouldn't do, that they're all the arguments are going to have an element that is fragile. So if we stop trying to perceive perfect arguments, then we're gonna get peace finally, and we're gonna get happy and live a stable and peaceful life. That's Pyrrhonian skepticism. That's radical. But then the academics developed skepticism, and also uh, stopped agreeing with that, actually. But in the first moment, they agreed with Pyrrhus and gradually become synthesizer of different views. That's why eclecticism. Eclecticism is this comprehension of like synthesizing different views. And that's what the academics do. So it's very common that we also see academic skepticism being treated as the same as moderate skepticism. If someone say that, oh, I believe in academic skepticism about that, so this person does not believe on these people. They actually believe on a moderate skepticism, right? And that's very commonly said. Also, Augustine has a book that is against the academics. They're talking about the skeptics. So academic is a term that were used to talk about the skeptics a lot, right? Oh, I just saw that the title were behind me, but now it's okay. So the first academic that we're going to talk about is Arcellarius. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Arcesilos. That's something like that. He critiques the idea of arguing that there is no way to go from opinion to justification. He says that there is no way to go from an opinion to a justified opinion, right? He says, okay, we can have like a good comprehension of things, but this good comprehension never comes to, okay, now this is justified, now this is true. So, and remember, if there is no truth, if there is no justification that is beyond everything, there is no opinion, actually. There's no valid opinion too. So here Arcesilaus um, puts himself as a skeptic, as a very radical skeptic. But then the skepticism goes away gradually, beginning with Carneades. Without absolute truth, there is no truth at all, right? We're obligated, but we're obligated to impress probable beliefs in the world to be able to live, but never supposing it can be true, right? This slide, something happened with this slide. Actually, it has some words wrong. I'm sorry. So don't follow by it. Hear my voice, because you know something happened. I don't know. The archive have some problem when processing it. But okay, no problem. I'll explain it. they he agrees that there is no truth at all, but he say, okay, but for us to live we need to have beliefs, we cannot simply live our lives peacefully. As Pyrrhus said, we need to impress some kind of true and false on the world, right? We need to wrongly impress. There is no such a thing as a probable belief, or a belief that is better than the other. All the beliefs are equally unjustified and equally wrong. But in the world, we need to use them to live. And then he accepts some kind of dogmatism. You know, he accepts that we justify our actions, that we justify theories, but not as a true theory. He says that we need to justify it only as a probable thing. And this probable thing is something that we impress into the world, right? We put it on the world, and it's not on the world. The possibility of knowledge is not on the world, but we need that. So we simply suppose that this exists for us to live our lives. But then Philo changes everything. Philo begins eclecticism, right? Now he is no longer a skeptic. He does not believe that knowledge is impossible, right? Look his argument. His argument is very good. Stoic logic is not justified. Okay, because here the main object that they were criticizing were Stoic logic. They talked about the catapletic like, impressions, and they said, oh, you can never go from an opinion to a justified opinion. Here he's talking about actually the catapletic impressions. You can only talk about impressions. You can only talk about seemings, about vague and bad seemings. You can never talk about this justified, good and solid catapletic impression, right? And here he agrees. Stoic logic is not justified, but it just means that we don't comprehend nothing. But maybe we can. Things are comprehensible in its nature, but not in but but not in our logic, right? I put it wrong in the slide. Probability prob, probability is something. Oh my god, I don't know what happened with those eclectic slides. I'll correct it and come back. Okay, now I'm back with the correct slide. Things are comprehensible in its nature, but not by our logic. Okay, so what he means with that, the nature is comprehensible, you know, because the only thing I can say is that I don't comprehend it. But how could you say that it is not comprehensible if you do not comprehend it, right? So the only thing you can affirm is that I don't know it. I don't know the nature. But ontologically, on the existence of the nature, it's comprehensible. Something is comprehensible until we prove that it's not, because we're trying to comprehend it, and we have not succeeded yet. But there is no good reason to think that we will never get into truth, because you don't know nothing to affirm that. So they kind of they're so skeptic, then they become dogmatic, right? And when I talk about dogmatic, it's not about someone that accepts dogmas, not necessarily, but it's simply someone that believes in knowledge, right? Probability is not something that we put in the world, but actually the attempt to know. We have only our attempts to know. The only thing we have, the only thing we can affirm, we have our attempts to know, and these attempts show show as better or worse. You have theories that are better and theories that are worse. So we we cannot say that those theories will always be wrong, but just our best theories are wrong. We can only affirm that. And then the other academic concludes the very obvious conclusion of that theory. We're free to suppose that anything is true. Like, we can freely say that an unjustified theory is wrong and a better theory can be true. So they simply accept a complete dogmatism. He says, oh, no, so then we can be absolute dogmatics. We can say we can be Stoics, for an example, that believe completely that his justifications can express God's rationality, right? Because, well, if there is no way of proving that we will never understand things, well, then we can understand it. And he also says that Platonic and Aristotelian theories are the same with different usage of terms, right? They say that Plato and Aristotle agreed on anything. They just use different terms, and an interesting interpretation. I don't think it stands, right? I don't think you can say that, but that's really interesting to think about it, because we have very similar passages on Plato and Aristotle. And then we have Cicero, which you're probably gonna see people talking a lot about Cicero when talking about skepticism, about ancient skepticism, right? And Cicero synthesizes the academic skepticism and eclecticism, right? He has a very significant historical importance, but not actually a theoretical importance. He didn't develop a good and important theory. He just, synthesizes and argues and defend the academic ideas of that time, right? So that's it. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry about the problems with the slides, but that's it. Thank you for watching.